4 kids left in a cardboard box, the terrifying truth behind their clothes. The pre-dawn air was crisp and cool, carrying the scent of freshly baked bread that wafted from Michael's Daily Bread, a small, family-owned bakery in the heart of Harmony Creek, a quiet town nestled in the rolling hills of Pennsylvania. Michael Russo, the bakery's owner, a man in his late 50s with a kind face and a perpetually flour-dusted apron, was humming a tuneless melody as he prepared for the morning rush. He was a creature of habit, his days governed by the rhythm of the bakery, mixing dough, kneading, shaping, baking, and serving his loyal customers. He had inherited the bakery from his father, and it was more than just a business to him. It was a legacy, a connection to his family, and a cornerstone of the community. He unlocked the back door, stepping out into the small alleyway to retrieve a delivery of flour that was usually left there overnight. But instead of the familiar stack of burlap sacks, he found something else. A large cardboard box, sealed with packing tape, sitting near the back entrance. He frowned, puzzled. He wasn't expecting any other deliveries. He cautiously approached the box, his senses on alert. He heard a faint sound, a whimper, coming from inside. His heart skipped a beat. He knelt down, carefully tearing open the tape. He lifted the flaps, and his breath caught in his throat. Inside the box, huddled together for warmth, were 4 children, ranging in age from perhaps 2 to 7 years old. They were dirty, disheveled, and their eyes were wide with fear and confusion. They were all dressed in simple, almost identical clothing, plain gray tunics and trousers. Michael stared at them, his mind reeling. Abandoned. For children, abandoned in a box outside his bakery. It was unthinkable, unbelievable, yet undeniably real. "Hey there," he said, his voice soft and gentle, trying to mask his shock and alarm. "Are you all right? What are you doing here?" The children didn't respond. They just stared at him, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear and mistrust. The youngest, a little girl with tangled blonde hair, started to cry, a soft, whimpering sound that tugged at Michael's heart. He reached into the box, gently lifting the little girl out. She was light as a feather, her body trembling. He held her close, trying to soothe her, to reassure her. "It's okay," he whispered. "You're safe now. I'm going to take care of you." He looked at the other children, 2 boys and another girl, all staring at him with wary eyes. "Come on," he said. "Let's get you inside. It's cold out here." He carefully helped the children out of the box, guiding them into the warm, fragrant interior of the bakery. The sudden change in temperature, the smell of baking bread, the comforting presence of Michael, seemed to calm them slightly. He led them to a small table near the back of the bakery, where he usually took his breaks. He sat them down, his mind racing, trying to figure out what to do. He brought them warm milk and freshly baked rolls, watching as they devoured the food with a hunger that spoke of days, perhaps weeks, of neglect. He noticed that they were all unusually quiet, not speaking to each other, not even making eye contact. It was as if they had been trained to be silent, to be invisible. As they ate, Michael examined their clothing more closely. The gray tunics and trousers were made of a coarse, unfamiliar fabric, and on the sleeve of each tunic, he noticed a small, embroidered symbol, a circle with a strange, intricate design inside it. It was a symbol he had never seen before, and it sent a shiver of unease down his spine. He knew he couldn't handle this alone. He needed help, professional help. He thought of Isabel, his friend from high school, who was now a police officer in Harmony Creek. She was tough, resourceful, and compassionate. She would know what to do. The discovery of the abandoned children had shattered the peaceful routine of Michael's morning, transforming his bakery from a place of warmth and comfort into a scene of mystery and profound concern. The children, silent and fearful, were a stark reminder of the darkness that existed in the world, a darkness that had unexpectedly intruded upon his quiet, ordinary life. But in the face of this extraordinary situation, Michael's compassion, his innate decency, had shone through, prompting him to act, to protect, and to seek help for these vulnerable souls. The box, a symbol of abandonment and neglect, had become a catalyst for action, setting in motion a chain of events that would test his courage, his resilience, and his faith in humanity. The aroma of baking bread usually filled Michael with a sense of calm and satisfaction, but this morning it did little to soothe his anxiety. He paced back and forth in his small office, his phone pressed to his ear, listening to the ringing on the other end. "Come on, Isabel, pick up," he muttered, his voice laced with urgency. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he heard her voice, slightly groggy from sleep. "Michael, what's wrong? It's barely 6 in the morning." "Isabel, I need your help," Michael said, his voice trembling slightly. Something happened. I found 4 children abandoned outside the bakery." There was a moment of silence on the other end. Then Isabel's voice, now sharp and alert. "Abandoned? Children? Are they all right?" They're scared and hungry, but they seem okay. Physically. I gave them some food and milk. But I don't know what to do. They're so young, Isabel. And there's something strange about their clothes." He described the gray tunics, the unfamiliar symbol embroidered on the sleeves. Isabel's response was immediate. "Don't touch anything, Michael. Don't let anyone near them. I'm on my way." Isabel Ramirez arrived at the bakery within minutes, her police cruiser's lights flashing silently in the early morning gloom. She was a woman in her late 30s, with a strong, athletic build, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her eyes sharp and intelligent. She and Michael had been friends since childhood, their bond forged by shared experiences and a mutual respect for each other's integrity. She stepped inside the bakery, her gaze immediately drawn to the 4 children huddled together at the back table. They looked up at her, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "Michael, tell me everything," she said, her voice calm but firm. Michael recounted the events of the morning, describing his discovery of the box, the children's condition, his immediate response. He showed her the symbol on their clothing, his unease growing with each passing moment. Isabel examined the children carefully, speaking to them softly, trying to gain their trust. But they remained silent, their faces blank, their eyes averted. She noticed their thin frames, their unkempt hair, the signs of neglect that spoke of a difficult past. She knelt down, trying to get on their level, to make eye contact. "Hey there," she said, her voice gentle. "My name is Isabel. I'm a police officer. I'm here to help you. Can you tell me your names?" The children remained silent, their eyes fixed on the floor. The oldest boy, perhaps 6 or 7 years old, reached out and grabbed the hand of the little girl beside him, his grip tight and protective. Isabel sighed, her heart aching for these children. She knew that gaining their trust would take time, patience, and a gentle approach. She turned to Michael, her expression serious. "This is not a simple case of abandonment, Michael," she said. "Those symbols, I've seen them before. In a briefing on cross-border child trafficking rings." Michael stared at her, his blood running cold. Child trafficking? It was a concept he had only encountered in news reports, in distant, horrifying stories. He couldn't believe that it was happening here, in his quiet town, in his bakery. "Trafficking," he repeated, his voice hoarse. "But who would do such a thing? And why these children?" Isabel shook her head. "I don't know, Michael, but I'm going to find out. These symbols, they're a link, a clue. I'm going to contact the FBI, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. We need to identify these children, find out where they came from, and bring the people responsible to justice." She looked at the children again, her eyes filled with a fierce determination. "They're safe now, Michael," she said. "You did the right thing by calling me. But this is going to be dangerous. These traffickers, they're ruthless. They won't hesitate to hurt anyone who gets in their way." Michael felt a shiver of fear, but he also felt a surge of resolve. He had stumbled into something far bigger, far darker than he had ever imagined. But he wouldn't back down. He wouldn't abandon these children. He would do whatever it took to protect them, to help Isabel bring their abusers to justice. "I'm not afraid, Isabel," he said, his voice firm. "I'll help you, whatever you need." Isabel nodded, a grateful smile touching her lips. "I know you will, Michael. Thank you. She turned back to the children, her expression softening. We're going to take you to a safe place, she said. A place where you can rest and play and be children again. No one is going to hurt you anymore. I promise. The children, still silent, looked at her, their eyes searching, questioning. They didn't understand her words, but they sensed her kindness, her sincerity, her unwavering commitment to their safety. And in that moment, a flicker of hope, a spark of trust, began to ignite within their hearts. The call to Isabel had transformed the situation from a personal act of compassion into a criminal investigation, a dangerous undertaking that would require courage, resourcefulness, and an unwavering commitment to justice. The friendship between Michael and Isabel would be tested. Their lives would be irrevocably changed, but their shared determination to protect these innocent children would be the driving force behind their actions. Isabel Ramirez, true to her word, immediately contacted the relevant authorities. Within hours, representatives from the FBI's Child Exploitation Task Force and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC, arrived at Harmony Creek. The quiet town, unaccustomed to such attention, became a hive of activity, the local police station buzzing with the presence of federal agents and specialists. The children were taken to a local hospital for a thorough medical examination. They were found to be malnourished, dehydrated, and suffering from various minor injuries. But more significantly, they showed signs of severe emotional trauma, consistent with prolonged abuse and neglect. They were withdrawn, nonverbal, and exhibited a fear of adults that spoke volumes about their past experiences. Isabel, working closely with the FBI agents, focused on the unusual symbols embroidered on the children's clothing. She sent photographs of the symbols to NCMEC, hoping for an identification, a link to a known trafficking ring, a clue that might lead them to the children's origins. The response from NCMEC was swift and alarming. The symbols were identified as belonging to a particularly ruthless and elusive child trafficking organization operating primarily in Eastern Europe, but with known links to criminal networks in the United States. They were known for their brutality, their sophisticated methods, and their ability to operate across international borders with impunity. This is bigger than we thought, Isabel, said Special Agent David Chun, the lead FBI investigator, no relation to Officer Chloe Chun. This is a major trafficking operation, and these children are just the tip of the iceberg. Isabel felt a surge of anger and determination. She had stumbled upon something truly horrific, a criminal enterprise that preyed on the most vulnerable members of society. She was determined to do everything in her power to bring these criminals to justice, to rescue the children, and to prevent future tragedies. The investigation began in earnest. The FBI agents, working with Isabel and the local police, started tracing the children's possible route, using the symbols as a starting point. They contacted law enforcement agencies in neighboring states, sharing information, coordinating efforts, and casting a wide net in search of any leads. They also focused on Michael's bakery, examining the back alley, searching for any clues that might shed light on how the children had been left there. They interviewed Michael extensively, reviewing security camera footage from neighboring businesses and canvassing the area for potential witnesses. Michael, still reeling from the shock of the discovery, cooperated fully with the investigation. He provided the investigators with everything he knew, sharing his observations, his concerns, his fears. He was haunted by the image of the children huddled together in that box, their eyes filled with terror. He felt a deep sense of responsibility for their safety, a determination to help bring them justice. The investigation was slow and painstaking work, a process of gathering information, analyzing data, and following up on every lead, no matter how small. The FBI agents, with their vast resources and expertise, were able to piece together a tentative picture of the trafficking ring's operations. They discovered that the children had likely been smuggled into the country from Eastern Europe, transported across state lines, and destined for a life of forced labor or sexual exploitation. The symbols on their clothing were believed to be a form of branding, a way for the traffickers to identify and control their victims. The investigation also revealed that Harmony Creek was not an isolated incident. There had been similar reports of abandoned children in other small towns across the country, all bearing the same distinctive symbols. The trafficking ring was operating on a large scale, its tentacles reaching across state lines and international borders. Isabel, despite the overwhelming scope of the investigation, remained focused on the immediate task: protecting the children and finding the person who had left them at the bakery. She believed that this person, though likely a low-level operative in the trafficking ring, held a crucial piece of the puzzle. She reviewed the security camera footage from the bakery and neighboring businesses again and again, searching for any detail, any clue that might have been overlooked. And then she saw it. A fleeting image, captured by a camera across the street from a bakery, showed a dark-colored van parked in the alleyway in the early hours of the morning. The image was grainy and indistinct, but it was enough to identify the make and model of the vehicle. Isabel immediately issued a BOLO, be on the lookout, alert for the van, distributing the information to law enforcement agencies across the region. She knew that finding the van was their best chance of identifying the person who had abandoned the children and potentially of leading them to the larger trafficking ring. The investigation was far from over, but it was gaining momentum. The symbols, initially a mystery, had become a key, unlocking the door to a vast and horrifying criminal enterprise. Isabel, driven by her compassion for the children and her unwavering commitment to justice, was determined to follow the trail, to expose the truth, and to bring the perpetrators to justice. The seemingly simple act of abandoning children in a box had triggered a complex and far-reaching investigation, revealing a darkness that lurked beneath the surface of everyday life, a darkness that Isabel was determined to confront and conquer. While the investigation unfolded, the 4 children were placed in the temporary care of a local foster family, the Millers, known for their experience with traumatized children. Sarah Miller, yet another, different Sarah, a warm and compassionate woman with a gentle demeanor, welcomed them into her home, a cozy farmhouse on the outskirts of Harmony Creek. Her husband, Tom, a retired carpenter with a kind smile and a knack for making children laugh, helped create a safe and nurturing environment. It wasn't easy. The children, understandably, were withdrawn and fearful. They didn't speak English, and their communication was limited to gestures, whispers, and the occasional, heart-wrenching cry. They clung to each other, their bond forged in shared trauma, their trust in adults shattered. Sarah and Tom, with the guidance of social workers and child psychologists, approached the children with patience, understanding, and unconditional love. They provided them with comfortable beds, nourishing meals, and clean clothes. They created a predictable routine, offering a sense of stability and security that the children had likely never known. They didn't push the children to talk, to reveal their past, to share their experiences. They simply offered them a safe space, a place to heal, a place to be children again. They played games with them, read them stories, and took them on walks in the surrounding fields, slowly, gradually earning their trust. Michael, despite the warnings from Isabel about the potential danger, couldn't stay away. He visited the Millers' farmhouse regularly, bringing freshly baked bread, pastries, and small toys for the children. He felt a deep connection to them, a sense of responsibility that went beyond his initial act of compassion. He didn't speak their language, but he found other ways to communicate. He would sit with them, drawing pictures, playing with building blocks, and simply offering his presence, his silent support. He would hum the same tuneless melody he had hummed on the morning he found them, a familiar sound that seemed to soothe them. Slowly, gradually, the children began to respond. The little girl, who Sarah had named Lily, after discovering a small, faded tattoo of a lily flower on her arm, started to smile, a tentative, fragile smile that lit up her face. The older boy, who they called Alex, after a similar tattoo, began to engage in playful interactions, his eyes losing some of their haunted look. The other 2 children, a boy named Ben and a girl named Chloe, remained more withdrawn, but even they showed signs of progress. They started to eat more, to sleep better, to engage in small acts of play. The community of Harmony Creek rallied around the children, showering them with gifts, clothes, and offers of support. The local church organized a fundraising drive, collecting money for the children's medical expenses and future needs. The town's residents, initially shocked and horrified by the discovery of the abandoned children, transformed their fear and outrage into acts of kindness and compassion. One evening, as Michael was visiting the Millers, he noticed a man standing across the street, watching the farmhouse. The man was tall and thin, with a weathered face and a quiet intensity. He was dressed in simple, unassuming clothes, but there was something about his demeanor, his watchful gaze, that made Michael uneasy. He pointed the man out to Sarah, who recognized him instantly. "That's Thomas," she said. "Thomas Blackwood. He lives on the farm next door. He's a bit of a recluse, but he's harmless. He's been keeping an eye on things since the children arrived." Michael felt a sense of relief, but also a flicker of curiosity. He decided to introduce himself. He approached Thomas, extending his hand. "Mr. Blackwood," he said, "I'm Michael Russo. I'm the one who found the children." Thomas Blackwood shook Michael's hand, his grip firm and surprisingly strong. "I know," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I saw you bring them here. You did a good thing, Mr. Russo." "I just did what anyone would have done," Michael said. Thomas looked at him, his eyes searching, assessing. "Not everyone," he said. "Not everyone would have cared enough to get involved. Not everyone would have risked their own safety to protect those children." Michael felt a strange connection to this man, a sense of shared purpose, a shared understanding of the danger that lurked in the shadows. "I heard about the symbols," Thomas said, his gaze shifting towards the farmhouse. "I know something about those symbols, Mr. Russo, and I know the kind of people who use them. They're not to be trifled with." Michael felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you know?" he asked. Thomas hesitated, then said, "I know they're dangerous, and I know they'll be back. They won't give up on those children easily." He looked at Michael, his eyes filled with a warning. "You need to be careful, Mr. Russo. You've made yourself a target, and you need to protect those children, no matter the cost." Michael nodded, his resolve hardening. He knew that Thomas was right. The danger was real, and it was closer than he thought. He had stumbled into a dark and dangerous world, a world of child trafficking and ruthless criminals. But he wouldn't back down. He would protect the children, and he would help Isabel bring their abusers to justice, no matter the cost. The safe haven he had created, with the help of the Millers and the community, was about to be tested, and the quiet, unassuming baker was about to become an unlikely hero, a protector of the innocent, a fighter for justice. The aroma of baking bread, usually a comforting and familiar scent, now seemed to carry a hint of menace. Michael stood behind the counter of his bakery, his senses on high alert, his eyes constantly scanning the street outside. Ever since his conversation with Thomas Blackwood, he had felt a growing sense of unease, a premonition of danger. It was a slow afternoon, with only a few customers trickling in and out. Michael tried to focus on his work, kneading dough, shaping loaves, and arranging pastries in the display case. But his mind kept drifting back to the children, to the symbols on their clothing, to the ruthless trafficking ring that was undoubtedly searching for them. He had informed Isabel about his conversation with Thomas, and she had assured him that the police were doing everything they could to track down the van and identify the people responsible for abandoning the children. But she had also warned him to be vigilant, to be aware of his surroundings, and to report anything suspicious. Suddenly, the bell above the door chimed, announcing a new customer. Michael looked up, his heart skipping a beat. A man stood in the doorway, his tall, muscular frame filling the entrance. He was dressed in a dark suit, his face obscured by sunglasses, his demeanor cold and menacing. He looked out of place in the cozy, small-town bakery, his presence radiating an aura of danger that sent a shiver down Michael's spine. The man approached the counter, his eyes scanning the bakery, taking in every detail. He stopped in front of Michael, his gaze fixed on him, his expression unreadable. "I'm looking for something special," the man said, his voice a low growl, his accent vaguely Eastern European. Something unique. Michael felt a knot of fear tighten in his stomach. He knew, instinctively, that this man was not here to buy bread. He was here for the children. I don't understand, Michael stammered, trying to maintain a semblance of composure. We have bread, pastries, cakes. What are you looking for? The man leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Don't play dumb with me, Baker, he said. You know what I'm talking about. The children. The 4 little packages that were delivered here a few weeks ago. Michael's heart pounded in his chest. He tried to remain calm, to stall for time, to think of a way out of this situation. I don't know what you're talking about, he said, his voice trembling slightly. There are no children here. You must have the wrong place. The man smiled, a cold, cruel smile that didn't reach his eyes. I don't think so, he said. We have ways of finding things out. We know they were here, and we know you helped them. He reached inside his jacket, his hand disappearing into the dark fabric. Michael tensed, expecting him to pull out a gun, a knife, some weapon. But instead, the man produced a photograph. It was a picture of the 4 children taken at the Miller's farmhouse. They were playing in the yard, their faces blurred, but their distinctive gray clothing clearly visible. These are them, aren't they? The man said, his voice a menacing whisper. Were they, Baker? Tell me, and this will all be over quickly. Michael felt a surge of anger, a fierce protectiveness towards the children. He wouldn't betray them. He wouldn't let this man harm them. I told you, he said, his voice gaining strength. I don't know anything about any children. Now, get out of my bakery before I call the police. The man laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. You think the police can protect you? He said. You have no idea who you're dealing with. We have eyes everywhere. We have people everywhere. You can't hide them from us. He leaned closer, his breath hot on Michael's face. Tell me where they are, Baker, he said, his voice low and menacing. Or things will get unpleasant. Michael stood his ground, his fear battling with his determination. He knew he was in danger, that this man was capable of violence. But he wouldn't back down. He wouldn't betray the children. Get out, Michael said, his voice trembling but firm. Get out of my bakery and don't come back. The man stared at him, long moment. I will find them. The bell on the door. The bakery stood silent. The man stared at him for a long moment, his eyes filled with cold fury. Then he smiled again, that same cruel, chilling smile. You've made a mistake, Baker, he said. A big mistake. You'll regret this. He turned and walked out of the bakery, disappearing into the afternoon crowd. The bell above the door chimed again, a mocking farewell. Michael stood there, his body shaking, his heart pounding. He had faced down the threat, but he knew it was far from over. The man, whoever he was, would be back, and he would be more dangerous than ever. He immediately called Isabel, his voice urgent, his words tumbling over each other. He told her about the man, the photograph, the threats. Isabel listened calmly, her voice reassuring. Stay put, Michael, she said. I'm on my way, and I'm sending backup. Michael locked the doors of the bakery, his hands trembling. He knew he had to protect himself, to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. He had crossed a line, become a target, but he had no regrets. He had done what was right, what any decent human being would have done. He had chosen to stand and protect the innocent, to fight for justice, to resist the darkness that had invaded his quiet, ordinary life. And he was ready to face whatever came next, armed with his courage, his determination, and the unwavering support of his friends and community. The threat had arrived, the danger was real, and the quiet baker was about to become an unlikely hero, a shield against the storm. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the interior of Michael's daily bread, the usually comforting aroma of baking bread now tinged with the metallic scent of fear. Michael had locked the doors, pulled down the shades, and turned off the lights, transforming his cozy bakery into a makeshift fortress. He had called Thomas Blackwood, his neighbor from the farm, and explained the situation. Thomas, a man of few words but unwavering loyalty, had arrived within minutes, armed with a shotgun and a grim determination. "They'll be back," Thomas said, his voice low and steady. "They won't give up easily." Michael nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew Thomas was right. The man from the bakery, with his cold eyes and menacing threats, was not the type to walk away. They positioned themselves near the back door, the most likely point of entry. Michael held a heavy rolling pin, his hands sweating, his knuckles white. Thomas stood beside him, his shotgun held at the ready, his eyes scanning the alleyway outside. The wait was agonizing, each minute stretching into an eternity. The silence of the bakery was broken only by the occasional creak of the floorboards, the distant sound of traffic, and the frantic beating of Michael's heart. Suddenly, they heard a noise, a scraping sound coming from the back door. Someone was trying to pick the lock. Thomas raised his shotgun, his finger on the trigger. Michael gripped the rolling pin tighter, his body tensing, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. The lock clicked, the door creaked open, and a figure slipped inside, silhouetted against the dim light of the alleyway. It was the man from the bakery, the man who had threatened him. He was not alone. Two other men, equally menacing, flanked him. "I told you I'd be back, Baker," the man said, his voice a low growl. "Now, tell me where the children are, and this will all be over quickly." Michael stood his ground, his voice trembling but firm. "They're not here," he said, "and you're not getting past US." The man laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "You think you can stop us?" he said. "You're just a baker and an old man with a shotgun. We're professionals." Thomas stepped forward, his shotgun aimed squarely at the man's chest. "I may be old," he said, his voice calm and steady, "but I can still shoot straight. And I won't hesitate to defend myself and my friend." The man's smile faltered, his eyes flickering with uncertainty. He hadn't expected resistance, hadn't anticipated that the baker and his elderly neighbor would be so determined. "Don't be stupid," he said, his voice losing some of its confidence. "Just tell us where the children are, and we'll leave. No one has to get hurt." "They're safe," Michael said, "and they're not going anywhere with you." Suddenly, the sound of sirens pierced the air, growing louder with each passing second. Isabel, true to her word, had arrived with backup. The man's eyes widened in alarm. He turned to his companions, his face contorted with rage. "Let's go," he shouted. "Get out of here." They turned to flee, but it was too late. Police cars screeched to a halt in the alleyway, blocking their escape. Officers poured out of the vehicles, their guns drawn, their voices shouting commands. The three men were quickly apprehended, disarmed, and handcuffed. They offered little resistance, their bravado crumbling in the face of overwhelming force. Isabel rushed inside the bakery, her eyes searching for Michael and Thomas. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. Michael nodded, his body shaking with adrenaline. "We're fine," he said. "But they know about the children, Isabel. They know we're protecting them." Isabel's expression hardened. "We'll take care of it, Michael," she said. "We'll make sure they're safe." She turned to her fellow officers, issuing orders, directing the investigation. The three men were taken into custody, their identities quickly confirmed. The leader, the man who had confronted Michael, was identified as James Malkovich, a known associate of the Eastern European trafficking ring. The confrontation at the bakery had been a close call, a dangerous encounter that could have ended tragically. But thanks to the courage of Michael and Thomas and the swift response of Isabel and the police, the children were safe, and a crucial link in the trafficking chain had been broken. The stand to protect the innocent, the willingness to confront evil, had prevailed. But the battle was far from over. The larger trafficking ring remained at large, and the children were still vulnerable. The fight for justice, the pursuit of safety, would continue, fueled by the unwavering commitment of those who had chosen to stand up and protect the most vulnerable among them. The bakery, once a scene of fear and tension, was now filled with a sense of relief, of gratitude, and of renewed determination. The aroma of baking bread, once again, carried a message of hope, of resilience, and of the enduring power of human kindness in the face of darkness. The arrest of James Malkovich and his accomplices at Michael's Bakery was a significant victory, but it was just one battle in a much larger war. The investigation, now led by the FBI's Child Exploitation Task Force, expanded rapidly, reaching across state lines and international borders. Isabel Ramirez, working closely with Special Agent Chen, played a crucial role in the investigation. Her initial discovery of the symbols, her quick thinking, and her unwavering commitment to the children had provided the crucial breakthrough that had unraveled the trafficking ring's operations. The information gleaned from Malkovich and his associates, combined with the data gathered from NCMEC and international law enforcement agencies, led to a series of coordinated raids across the country. Dozens of children were rescued, and numerous members of the trafficking ring were arrested, including several high-ranking figures who had long evaded justice. The investigation revealed the shocking scale and brutality of the trafficking operation. The children, mostly from impoverished backgrounds in Eastern Europe, had been lured to the United States with false promises of a better life, only to be subjected to horrific abuse and exploitation. They had been forced into child labor, sexual slavery, and other forms of unimaginable cruelty. The rescued children, including the 4 found at Michael's Bakery, were placed in the care of specialized trauma centers, where they received medical attention, counseling, and support services. The long and difficult process of healing had begun, but the scars of their experiences would likely remain for a lifetime. The community of Harmony Creek, initially shocked and horrified by the events that had unfolded in their midst, rallied around the children and the individuals who had helped protect them. Michael Russo, the unassuming baker, was hailed as a local hero, his courage and compassion celebrated by his neighbors and friends. He received numerous awards and accolades, but he remained humble, insisting that he had simply done what anyone would have done. He continued to visit the children, offering his support, his friendship, and his unwavering commitment to their well-being. He even offered a part-time job to them. Thomas Blackwood, the quiet recluse who had stood by Michael's side, also received recognition for his bravery.